Everyone. Welcome to Congresswoman Susie Lee's Town Hall. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Quinn Fisher, and I will be facilitating tonight's conversation. I will turn it over to the Congresswoman for her opening remarks. While she gives her remarks, feel free to begin submitting your questions. Dial *3 to ask a question and *6 to subscribe to the Congresswoman's newsletter. Once again, that's *3 to ask a question and *6 to subscribe to the newsletter. Congresswoman Lee, over to you.
All right. Thanks, Quinn. Well, thank you all for taking the time to join me for my third town hall this year. As you may know, I'm in my fourth term representing the people of Nevada's 3rd Congressional District. This includes the southern portion of Las Vegas from Summerlin, Spring Valley, Enterprise, Silverado Ranch, all the way down to Laughlin and Searchlight. Listen, I know many of you are concerned about what you're seeing in this country, particularly as we are now into day 3 of the government shutdown, but also the terrifying rise in political violence. And before we begin, I just want to be very clear that political violence, no matter who its perpetrated upon, is never acceptable. And at this point in our country, we need to all work to turn down the temperature. And the way we move forward is through honest conversations like the one we are going to have tonight. So thank you all for taking the time to join me. And as a reminder, please press *3 to ask a question and *6 to subscribe to my email newsletter. And also, please stay on the line. We'll be asking a few poll questions throughout the call and really want to know what you're thinking. You can also stay on the line after the call to leave a message for my office. And please know that no matter what's going on here, that my work does not stop and neither does my team. We are always here to help on issues you're facing, and despite the ongoing shutdown, my offices here in Las Vegas and also in Washington remain open, and we're ready to help you. I know many of you are very concerned about the rising cost of living, of groceries, your hard-earned Social Security benefits, and the attack on health care and basic services that were passed by congressional Republicans this summer in what they term their big, beautiful bill. I have a different term for that, but that's what they call it. But listen, Republicans in Washington are now pushing a partisan spending bill that will cause health care costs to soar even more. And those costs are going to fall on hardworking Nevada families. And whether it be painful prices for premium, co-pays, deductibles, and prescription drugs, which, by the way, the president just announced more tariffs on prescription drugs, people are going to be feeling the pain. And that's exactly what is on the line right now. I have always been committed to making sure that families can live within their means, that you work hard, you can achieve the American dream, that your kids can get a good education, that you can retire with Social Security and dignity, that you can have access to health care. But listen, these are unprecedented times we're living in. And we're seeing a party that has full control of the presidency, the Senate, and the House, focused on things other than those goals that I just mentioned. And with respect to the shutdown, I want to be clear about 2 lies that have been passed about what this shutdown's about. First and foremost, as a Democrat, I am not fighting, nor are any Democrats fighting so that, as Republicans say, illegal immigrants can get health care, free health care. That has been illegal in this country since 1996. What we are fighting for is that the Affordable Care Act tax credits be extended. They expire at the end of this year. But the problem is that insurance companies and healthcare plans set their pricing beginning on November 1st. So we're running out of time. And we know that over 100,000 Nevadans will lose their health insurance because their prices will increase 75, 200, 300%, just completely unaffordable, and they will choose to go off of health care. And that means all of us, everyone in our state, will see their health care prices increase as a result. And the second thing is, I've heard Republicans say all Democrats need to do is pass a clean continuing resolution. It's getting a little wonky, but basically we have seen Republicans cut funding and freeze funding that has already been appropriated time and time again, including right now we know there's $13 billion in non-defense items that have been cut, including $607 million in direct programming that's been cut or frozen right here in our state of Nevada. And so, you know, we're drawing a line in the sand that we're ready to negotiate, but you actually need to come to the table to negotiate. So, you know, and listen, we have seen time and again that the Republican Party has really chosen to take these types of tactics which demonize immigrants to our country, demonize transgender members of our community, and it's making our communities less safe, and quite frankly, many of these actions are simply unconstitutional. But listen, they're being fought in the courts. Organizations like Democracy Forward are at the forefront of these legal battles. And between this and the impact of tariffs, the drop in visitors to Nevada, the rollbacks in solar energy that we've seen that really will result in the loss of 7,000 jobs here in our state, I know, and I hate to say this, but Nevada's in for a tough ride. And this recent budget bill is already taking a sledgehammer to our local economy. And I voted against the bill because it includes the largest cuts to health care coverage in U.S. history. It will increase your energy prices. It will cut jobs, particularly jobs that are intended to diversify our economy, which we know we need so much. It strips away food assistance for hungry kids and seniors. And by the way, it adds trillions of dollars to our national debt. And the whole reason is they want to protect the tax giveaways that they have given to the wealthiest Americans. So listen, I'm not even going to scratch the surface here. I know we're going to have plenty of questions about what's going on. But this shutdown can end. And it can end when Republicans come to the table with Democrats to protect the health care of American citizens. I want to reiterate that Republicans are in control of the House, the Senate, and the presidency. And if they want to get the government open, they need to act in a bipartisan manner. Because, by the way, these cuts don't just affect Democrats. They affect Republicans and independents all over this country. And so we're asking to negotiate because families are already getting notifications that their insurance bills may be double or triple what they currently pay. And in fact, here in Nevada, Nevada Health Link reported today that insurance costs will go up 26%. That's not even accounting for the tax credits that are intended to make it more affordable for people. And so, as you all know, I've been ranked the most bipartisan member of Congress. I've been in conversations with people on the other side of the aisle, and our request is let's sit down, let's figure out a way to extend these tax credits. And listen, I personally am open to some changes if we can at least get the tax credits extended for the people who need it the most, which is 94% of the people on these taking advantage of these tax credits earn less than $70,000 a year. Let's protect them and their health care. And by the way, let's try to keep down the cost of health care for all of us. So listen, we're going to answer some questions. I want to thank you all for joining. I'm looking forward to hearing from you today. As a reminder, please press *3 to ask a question or *6 to subscribe to my email newsletter. Thank you, and I'll turn it back to you, Quinn.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Before we get to your questions, we're going to start with a poll question. On a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being not at all concerned and 5 being extremely concerned, how concerned are you about rising healthcare costs? To answer, please dial your response 1 through 5. Once again, on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being not at all concerned and 5 being extremely concerned, how concerned are you about rising healthcare costs? To answer, please dial your response 1 through 5. Now, Congresswoman Lee will answer your questions. If you'd like to ask a question, dial *3. That's *3 to ask a question. When we get to your question, I will call your name and you will be able to ask your question live directly to the Congresswoman. Out of respect for the other attendees, please try to keep your question brief so that we can get to as many questions as possible in the time we have. With that, our first question is from Paul Nelson, who has a question about no tax on tips. Paul, you are live to ask your question.
Okay, actually it's Kathy Nelson, his wife. But my question is that I've been seeing a lot about this no tax on tips plan, and I know a lot of Nevadans count on tips for their pay. So I was hoping you could clarify what your position is and what this back and forth we've been seeing is. Thank you.
Kathy, thank you so much for that question. Let me be clear. I have always supported the policy of no tax on tips. In fact, I was a co-sponsor of a bill that passed the Senate, but the difference between my support on that bill that passed the Senate that Congressman Johnson failed to bring to the floor of the House was that it would make these tax breaks permanent. What Republicans chose to do instead was put it as an addendum into this big, beautiful bill that they passed. And while that bill made tax breaks permanent for the wealthiest Americans, it made no tax on tips expire in 2028. And by the way, there are income caps as well on the no tax on tips. So, you know, I keep putting on the table with Republicans, if you really believe in no tax on tips, why did Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, not bring the bill that had passed the Senate that made this policy permanent, that had some guardrails on it so wealthy hedge funds and investors weren't able to designate some of their income as tip income? And why didn't he bring that to the floor of the House in a separate vote and make it? Because they like to play political games. They included it in this big, beautiful bill, which, by the way, I already said cut $60 million a year from Medicaid in Nevada, cut out solar tax credits that have benefited our state and have grown an economy, and that will lead to the loss of 7,000 jobs, not to mention increase all of our energy prices and stripped away food assistance from kids and seniors. So I voted against that bill because of those provisions. Their temporary no tax on tips was part of that bill, but if they really wanted no tax on tips to be permanent, they should have supported the one that had already passed the Senate, that I was a co-sponsor of.
Our next question is from Sterling, who has a question about the government shutdown. Sterling, you are live to ask your question.
Oh, thank you. So with the government shutdown and how we actually faced something like this earlier in the current presidency administration, why did we not take a stand then? And why are we now crying wolf when we knew this was coming? This was nothing that we didn't already know. And people are getting their hikes rated and I mean like rates hiked, and it's why did we not take a stand in the beginning? We knew where this was going, and why have we let it get so far?
Sterling, thank you. And listen, I know your frustration because as we speak, insurance companies are setting their rates for 2026. Listen, government shutdowns are something that no one wants, and no one goes into them lightly. And in March, the Senate had enough votes to decide that they didn't want to do a government shutdown. I can't speak for the senators who voted against it and wanted to continue. But since then, what we have seen is this administration cut everything from, the Department of Education, repeal funding for USAID, repeal funding for the Public Broadcasting Institute, repeal funding for infrastructure projects and resiliency projects, especially here in Nevada. And I don't know what it was that made senators change their mind. I voted in March against the continuing resolution because I had much of the same concerns that I have right now. And at this point, I think that there had been enough of, I would just say, bad faith effort, not just on the behalf of the administration, but also the fact that Republicans in Congress have not stood up for our constitutional authority, which is to set spending and authorize spending of congressional money. They have literally turned the blind eye to allow this administration to come in and literally rip away funding from programs that were authorized by Congress. And in fact, I sit on the Appropriations Committee, and this summer we went through our traditional appropriations process, and we had an amendment that simply stated that we, as members of Congress, affirm that Congress has the ability to appropriate money, and we did not get one Republican vote on that amendment. And so this is sort of the line in the stand, because we know that on top of the Medicaid cuts, on top of the cuts in energy support, on top of the cuts in SNAP and food assistance, not to mention all of the rising costs that are associated with this crazy tariff policy, that Americans are hurting, and Americans are going to be forced to go without health insurance and lose health insurance, which will be costly for all of us. So this is at the breaking point. I don't know what took other members to get to that point. I was at the point in March, but at this point, again, all we're asking for is bipartisan negotiations to make sure that we protect the health care for Americans.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Reminder for all of our callers, dial *3 to ask a question. Once again, that's *3 to ask a question. With that, our next question is from Betsy from Las Vegas, who has a question about rising costs. Betsy, you are live to ask your question.
Yes, Congresswoman. I live in a rent-controlled apartment, in a senior rent-controlled apartment, and it's income restricted. And when Lombardo came in, our rents went up. He took off the rent control of 5%, and now for the last 3 years, it's gone up 9.3%, 9.8%, and this year I think it was 9.7%. And they're forcing us out to lower income status. What do we do? Where do we go?
Listen, Betsy, Thank you. And I know how incredibly stressful it is when you're living on a fixed income to see the cost of your rent increase and not know where you're going to get the money, on top of whether you're seeing prescription drug prices go up, your electricity bill go up. Where does the money come from? What we will do is we'll offline with you and get your email and your phone number, because we have resources where we can direct you towards for rental assistance. But, again, this is part of the problem with this administration rolling back funding for housing and urban development programs that will assist low-income seniors in affording rent, not to mention what's going on with all the other costs going up. But my staff will take your number and we'll try to get you connected with resources so that you can stay in your apartment, given rent is going up.
Our next question will be from Camilla from Las Vegas. Camilla has a question about the Epstein files. Camilla, you are live now to ask your question.
Hi, Congresswoman. I appreciate you doing this live town hall, but I would like to ask about the release of the Epstein files. I'm understanding that we have the votes to release the Epstein files, but the Congresswoman who's the deciding vote hasn't been sworn in yet. Can we expect a release of the files soon? And in your opinion, do you think they will be a complete release of the files, or will they be censored in ways that make them difficult to understand?
Thank you, Camilla, for that question. Yeah, so this is really sort of disgusting that we're in the middle of a government shutdown. Mike Johnson told Republicans to not come in last week. We were supposed to be in on Monday and Tuesday. That would have been the time for us to negotiate to avoid a shutdown. And he instructed his members to not come in. And the reason was because Adelita Grijalva has just been elected as a member of Congress from Arizona, and she's due to be sworn in. And once she gets sworn in, she will be the 218th signature on the discharge petition calling for the release of the Epstein files. So think about this. Our government shut down, federal employees are going without pay. There's threats that they're going to be fired. And the Speaker of the House will not call his members back to Congress because he does not want to swear in this member. And by the way, I just want you all to know, we showed up on the floor of the House for a pro forma session, which there were two Republicans that have just been sworn in, and they were both sworn in during a pro forma session. That's a session when most members aren't around. They shut the floor down so that she could not be sworn in because they don't want to have the release of the Epstein files. It is true corruption and a dereliction of duties at its finest. And, listen, when we get the files, I hope that they will be fully, not redacted, et cetera. I expect that there will be some shenanigans because that's what this Department of Justice has delivered so far. But we will fight and we will sue until we see the full contents of these files.
Now we're going to do our second poll question. The question is, in which area are you most concerned about costs rising? Dial 1 for healthcare, 2 for groceries, 3 for energy, 4 for housing, and 5 for other. Once again, in which area are you most concerned about costs rising? Dial 1 for healthcare, 2 for groceries, 3 for energy, 4 for housing, and 5 for other. Our next question is from Susan in Las Vegas. She has a question about the government shutdown. Susan, you are live to ask your question.
Hello.
I just had a
Hi.
question. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, thank you. Sorry. I was just wondering if you could please clarify a little bit more why we are in the government shutdown when Republicans control the House and the Senate. I was hearing that there was a filibuster, but I'm not sure if that's true. And then how long do you anticipate the shutdown will last?
Okay. Thank you, Susan, for that question. So
You're welcome.
I just sort of to walk you through what happens. At the end of September 30th is the end of the funding year. And we need to pass our spending bills by then in order to fund the government going into the next year. And if we don't do that, we have to pass what is called a continuing resolution. And generally, we have passed those stopgap measures along the way to just get us past some sticky points of negotiation. And usually it's gone up until the end of the year, like the 31st of December, and we pass them. If you recall, last year we had a continuing resolution that went the full year because the Republicans in control of all three bodies of government could not pass a full-scale spending bill. And generally, these are bipartisan in general. I mean, there's things that Republicans like in them. We have projects and infrastructure funding and funding for services that are in all communities across the country. So generally, it is a bipartisan exercise. So what's happening right now is they have a continuing resolution that they want to go through November 15th. And Democrats have said, we need to take care of these expiring Affordable Care Act tax credits that make health care affordable for Americans. And basically insurance companies set the rates beginning in, first of all, many of them do it October 1st. People get their notices November 1st and begin buying their insurance on the marketplace on November 1st. So we're saying we have to do this right now. And Republicans are saying, no, just pass our spending bill, and then maybe when we get around to it, we'll do it. But you got to remember, this administration, when in 2017, when Trump first came into office, his number one goal was not just to get rid of the tax subsidies, it was to get rid of the Affordable Care Act completely. So there's obviously a lack of trust on the part of Democrats that there will be a fair, good faith effort to actually negotiate and get something done so it will have an impact. And by the way, many people, let's say we don't do it and it extends through December, and then people have to start buying their insurance. People don't have, for a family of four making $64,000 a year, it's an extra $450 a month. People simply don't have that type of money, especially given rising costs in housing. You just heard a question about rent and groceries in particular, and rising costs of everything. And so we're saying we got to do this now. And this is how this can end, is that Republicans, by the way, I am a co-sponsor of a one-year extension of these tax subsidies that would buy us the time to actually negotiate on what we agree and disagree about all of the Affordable Care Act within that year. Let's pass that bill. It could be brought to the floor by Johnson today, and we could get bipartisan support for it, pass it through the Senate, and end the shutdown. Or we could come to an agreement, and a lot of this negotiation right now is happening in the Senate. We could come to an agreement in the Senate to say, yes, we're going to do this, and then we'll pass the CR. So what's happening is Republicans are saying, pass this budget, then we'll deal with these tax credits. And Democrats have sort of lost trust because we've seen $13 billion in non-defense spending cut out of the budget without any congressional approval. We have seen this administration freeze or pull back on appropriated funding. And so there's a lack of trust that, like, we're going to have a handshake deal and this is going to happen. Now, what's on the table for Republicans is they're saying we're going to do the filibuster, which basically saying they could pass a rule in the Senate. Right now in the Senate, in order to pass any bill, you need 60 votes. And that's why they need some Democrats to support this budget. And so they're saying, let's change the rules so you only need 51 votes and screw the Democrats and screw the American people with their health care costs. And let's just, push this through. So that's what they call the nuclear option. And I don't know if Thune, who is the Senate leader, will do that or not. But I think it's much better for the American people if we actually sit down and negotiate these tax credits, which, by the way, they impact Republicans just as much as Democrats. This is not a Democrat issue. It's an American issue, and it's about lowering people's costs. So my hope is, I know I've been in conversations. I know there's conversations that, we could make it happen. But as I said, Speaker Johnson just instructed his members to not come back to the House next week. And so if that's the case, it may not even be for another week. And the reason he doesn't want them to come back to the House is because he doesn't want to release the Epstein file. This is like corruption at the finest, holding on to power and not worrying about what is best for the American people.
Our next question is from Randall in Las Vegas, who has a question about seniors. Randall, you are live on the call to ask your question. Randall, can you hear us? Okay, we will go to our next question. Next question is going to be from Donald in Las Vegas, who has a question about Charlie Kirk. Donald, you are live to ask your question.
Thank you. I'm on my husband's phone. I'm actually Hope, not Donald. I would like to say thank you because I support you almost all the time, but I'm curious why you voted in favor of Resolution 719, honoring Mr. Kirk, given some of the negative things he said about women and minorities, and I was concerned about that.
Yeah, Hope, thank you for asking that question. First of all, let me be clear. The resolution, there's two parts to a resolution. One is sort of the declarations, and then the other one is what the resolution is about. And I support a resolution that says political violence has no place in America. But that doesn't mean that I don't think that demonizing people based on the color of their skin or who they love or what religion they have has a place in this country either. I think that, there are many things about Charlie Kirk and what came out of his mouth that I vehemently disagreed with. But as a member of Congress, we have a responsibility to condemn this violence whenever it occurs. Listen, some of the language, I have one vote. I don't have a perfect vote all the time, but I have one vote. And Republicans like to play these games where they put members of Congress, especially Democrats in this case, in tough situations where people don't understand how I could have voted for something like that. And I voted for the statement that political violence does not have a place in America. And I do believe that although I disagreed with many of his views, he nonetheless had the right to express them. And no one should be assassinated for speaking their mind in this country. I want to point out, too, that, when two Minnesota state legislators were killed this summer, Democrats put forward a resolution condemning political violence and an explanation of who those people were. And it passed unanimously. Republicans could have done that exact same thing with the Charlie Kirk resolution, but instead they chose to include politically charged language that really ripped at, some members' conscience about who Charlie Kirk, what he stood for, and whether they agreed with him or not. And so, like I said, I have one vote. I don't have a perfect vote, but my vote was that we need to protect our First Amendment rights and that political violence has no place in America.
Next, we are going to do another poll question. The question is, where do you get your information from government officials? Dial 1 for social media, 2 for TV, 3 for mail, 4 for government websites, 5 for email, 6 for friends and family, and 7 for other. Once again, where do you get your information from government officials? Dial 1 for social media, 2 for TV, 3 for mail, 4 for government websites, 5 for email, 6 for friends and family, and 7 for other. And just a reminder, if you'd like to ask a question, dial *3 to ask a question. That's *3 to ask a question. Our next question is going to come from Jan, who has a question about ACA tax credits. Jan, you are live to ask your question.
First, I want to say thank you very much, Congresswoman, for standing firm. I think it's worth the shutdown to have health care for everyone. I am a person that is receiving the health care premium tax credit, and once I don't have it, I probably will not be able to afford my insurance because it's going to go up quite a bit. If we're losing the tax credit and that's how much it's going to go up, it'll be unaffordable. My question is, will the end of the tax credits effectively end affordable health care, the CARE Act? Is that what they're trying to do?
Effectively, yes. Listen, first of all, thank you for that question. And I want to tell you, I think so many Americans have your story that, without these tax credits and without the Affordable Care Act, so many people would be without access to affordable health insurance. In fact, before the Affordable Care Act was passed here in Nevada, over 1 in 5 Nevadans was uninsured. And what that meant is they went without prenatal care. If they had a chronic condition, they waited until it was so bad. They didn't get the care they needed. Many people died. And they showed up in our emergency rooms. I have a very personal story. My mom and dad, my dad lost his job when he was 58 years old. And they both had high blood pressure, and they couldn't afford health insurance. And so they gambled and went without it. And my mom had a heart attack 1 week before she turned 65 and became eligible for Medicare. And they got a bill from the hospital that was essentially equal to the value of their home. And I lived through that stress of the catastrophe that came from a health scare. And so I don't want any American, including yourself, to have to go through that. And that's really what we're fighting for. And these tax credits, now listen, there are things we can do with respect to these tax credits and the extension to come to a compromise with Republicans that will not eliminate them completely. And that's really what I'm hoping we can work towards, so that we can preserve them, preserve the assistance that it provides to you, and get this government back open and operating. But yes, essentially this fight, on top of what was being cut out of Medicaid, on top of all the other cuts that we have seen, is really about making health care affordable for Americans. So thank you for that question.
Our next question is from Robert in Las Vegas, who has a question about bipartisanship. Robert, you are live to ask your question.
Yes, this is Robert. I was just wondering why, until the two parties come together, we will never be better. Why can the two parties not come together?
You know, Robert, that is a big, that's the goal, is that we need to work together. And I spend my time trying to do what I can to work with Republicans. I'm a member of the Problem Solvers Caucus, which is half Democrats, half Republicans. I've been ranked as the most bipartisan member of Congress. I passed bills expanding health care access with Richard Hudson, who is a Republican from North Carolina. I passed bills to bring down the cost of housing with David Joyce from Ohio. I don't think we go anywhere as a country until our Congress works together in a bipartisan manner. And that's really, honestly, what this shutdown's about, because, as I said, Republicans control the House and the Senate and the White House. But in order to pass the budget, you have to have bipartisanship. And Democrats are saying, listen, we're all for passing this budget, but let's take care of this health care issue, because we know millions of Americans, like my previous caller, are going to, health care is going to become unaffordable to them. And we care about that. And it's willing, we're willing to fight for that, because we know what it means to families, to seniors. One in five people taking advantage of these healthcare subsidies are between the ages of 50 and 60. 1 in 9 are children. It affects all of us. And so I agree with you. We have to find ways to work together. Unfortunately, this president, and, listen, there's things I agree with this president on. There's many things I don't agree with him on. But his rhetoric and what he is doing in trying to politicize our armed services, politicize, everything from what agencies he's going to cut. He's saying, I'm going to cut Democrat agencies. I don't know. I didn't know there were Democrat agencies in Washington. I thought they were American agencies. And so the rhetoric has got to come down. We've got to find a way where we can come together. And I do think that there is a bipartisan solution to get out of this. And it's literally, we have a bipartisan bill that will extend these tax credits for a year. And then we can work on some of the issues that many Republicans are hung up about and come up with a solution before November 1st of next year. But let's just get this done. And so hopefully we can come to a solution here before too many people are hurt by this shutdown.
We're going to do our final polling question of the night. The question is, what issue is your top priority for Congress to address? Dial 1 for cost of living, 2 for education, 3 for housing, 4 for public safety, 5 for immigration, 6 for healthcare, and 7 for others. The question is, what issue is your top priority for Congress to address? Dial 1 for cost of living, 2 for education, 3 for housing, 4 for public safety, 5 for immigration, 6 for healthcare, and 7 for other. We are getting close to the end of tonight's town hall, so we'll have time for 1 or 2 more questions. Our next question is going to be from Veronica in Las Vegas, who has a question about Social Security. Veronica, you are live to ask your question.
Thank you. My question is, I'm 60 years old. I've been at my job for 25 years. I just want to know, what do you think is how safe is our Social Security for the future? And what exactly did DOJ have access to in this whole process with our information?
Listen, I mean, there are reports that DOJ did have access to many people's Social Security numbers and personal information. I haven't seen confirmation of that, but I've seen reports of that. And listen, the Trump administration is preparing to propose a rule to cut SSI, Social Security benefits, and strip eligibility for hundreds of thousands of low-income older people and severely disabled adults. Under the rule that they're proposing, 400,000 beneficiaries living with families or friends experiencing struggles would likely have their benefits cut, typically by hundreds of dollars per month, or lose eligibility altogether. The current rules shield them from doing that, but there has been a report that the Trump administration is preparing this on top of, their efforts to potentially to privatize Social Security. And again, these are fights that we're willing to go to the mat for, because Social Security is an earned benefit. You have paid into Social Security your entire career. When you retire, you should be able to receive your benefits. And so, there's a potential cut in benefits as well that they're proposing. So that's sort of what's coming down the pike under this administration. Of course, we're going to, as Democrats, and me personally, I'm going to fight that, because like I said, this is an earned benefit that you've paid into, and you should be able to retire in dignity and know that you have access to the full benefits that you have paid into during your career.
This will be our final question of tonight's town hall. Question from Natalie in Las Vegas, who has a question about efforts to stand up to this administration. Natalie, you are live to ask your question.
This call will be recorded.
Hi. I was wondering about Project 2025, and do the Democrats stand a chance at all of being able to stave off this brazen push to formally establish it? There's laws and policies.
Yeah, listen.
And if there's anything possible that we can do as constituents to help prevent that from happening, anything.
Well, thank you, Natalie, for that question. I know it is something that many people obviously are worried about, seeing what has happened with this administration since Trump was sworn in January, taking steps that literally have been unconstitutional. There's three things. First of all, there's three things we can do. One, legislatively. Obviously, without control of the House and the Senate, it is very difficult to push back, although there have been efforts, for instance, even the release of the Epstein files as one example, where we can force discharge petitions by getting, 6 Republicans to sign on. We need 6 Republicans to grow a spine and flip and join us to take on some of the illegal actions of this administration to get something passed. And like I said, Johnson is not bringing the House back to session because he doesn't want to bring that discharge petition to the floor. But we can continue to do efforts like that. The other is activism, as, people in our community continuing to speak out. And by the way, speak to other people. I think that, you can't just be screaming without talking to other people and understanding where they're coming from, and maybe bridging a gap in understanding about what this government should or should not be doing. And listen, No King's Day is coming up October 18th. There are many ways to make sure you're speaking up, have your friends and family speak up, especially in congressional districts where Republicans serve. That's very helpful so that they hear from their constituents. And listen, it works. I want to remind you, a couple months ago in the middle of the night, Congressman Mark Amodei proposed an amendment that was going to sell off federal lands in Nevada and Utah. And I became aware of it, and we were able, through activism throughout this country, particularly in the West, we were able to get enough Republicans to join us to kill that amendment. But it really came from a groundswell of grassroots effort of people crossing the political divide to stand up for something. And then, of course, legal fights. And those tend to take longer, but we have been successful in the courts. We're going to continue to file lawsuit after lawsuit, especially as this administration continues to take unconstitutional actions against legal citizens living here, against people in our communities. I was particularly concerned about the president saying that our cities should become training grounds for our military. That was hugely concerning for me. I would expect that there's Republicans that believe the same. We have an organization called Democracy Forward that has been leading the legal fights, and they've been winning. The Supreme Court recently affirmed that Abrego Garcia had been wrongfully deported and should be brought back. They've also maintained that the government couldn't declare that people were quote unquote alien enemies without due process. Also, the First Circuit Court of Appeals flatly rejected the administration's attempt to enforce the president's executive order ending birthright citizenship. So these decisions are coming. They take a little longer. It's a little frustrating. People are subject to unconstitutional acts, but we can file stays and we can file injunctions and have the courts uphold them, and we have been winning those fights. So those are the three ways that we can continue to fight. And then, of course, we have an election next year, and, the Democrats winning the House of Representatives is another way that we can become, a resistance to some of these bad policies, because right now, without majority in the House, our speaker won't even open the floor so we can do business because he's afraid to bring the Epstein files to the floor of the House. It's ridiculous. And so those are the things we can continue to do. But I say continue to remain engaged. Do not lose hope. We got to fight for our democracy. We got to talk to people who agree with us, but also talk to people who don't agree with us as well, and try to bridge that divide because our country does work better, and we are a country when we work together.
There were a lot of questions that we did not get to tonight. As a reminder, you're always welcome to call or email our office with your questions for Congresswoman Lee. In addition, if you stay on the line after this call ends in a few minutes, you can leave a message for the office. Our office is open and here to help throughout the ongoing government shutdown. Thank you all for joining us tonight. I will turn it over to Congresswoman Lee for a brief conclusion.
All right. Thanks, Quinn. And thank all of you who stayed on this call, who are interested in what is going on in this country. And I'm glad we could discuss people's concerns. Listen, hearing from my constituents is what I do, why I do the job I do. And I can't do it without getting input from you who I serve. So thank you for taking the time to give me your input. If you have additional questions, please don't hesitate to write or call my office. But listen, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Nevada is in for a bumpy ride. And between what we call the Trump slump with a downturn in our tourism revenues, increased costs because of tariffs, increased housing costs because of tariffs, just sort of things not working because they've been slashing government resources left and right, not to mention the attacks on health care that really impact a state like ours that already has a health care shortage and struggles with people accessing health care. So, but, like one of the callers asked, why can we not get along? We have to work together. That's the only way we solve our problems. And please know that, while right now we are in what seems like a very partisan fight, because basically Republicans are choosing not to negotiate about Americans' health care, but they're going to get there because their constituents are going to speak up to them and say, our health care costs are going to go up too, and we need you to fight for it. So I do think we're going to see some resolution to this, but I just want everyone to know that I and my staff, who I have an incredible staff both here in Las Vegas and Nevada, continue to work for you, and our office remains open. I also want to point out that I've chosen to not take my paycheck during the shutdown, which every member of Congress should do. I mean, if we're not going to pay federal employees during a shutdown, why should members of Congress who can actually solve this problem get paid? And so I've made that commitment, but I'll continue to work to get this solved, and more importantly, to continue to work to bring down costs for Nevadans to make sure that we and our children have the opportunities and our seniors can retire with dignity. So thank you again. I'm proud to serve you as Nevada's representative for the 3rd Congressional District, and I encourage you to visit my website at susielee.house.gov to sign up for my newsletter, or follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, all at Rep. Susie Lee, all one word. And please stay in touch as well. It's been an honor to serve you, and thank you for tuning in.